Is Clemson's defensive line overrated? We got to talk about this. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. We have a ton to dive into as we are into game week now. On Monday, Brian Kelly met with reporters, Tigers getting ready for Clemson with their practice week beginning. I was at Brian Kelly's Monday press conference, got to ask a few questions, actually got to speak with Brian Kelly for a brief moment in the hall afterwards as well. I've dissected the whole 30 minutes. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to know here in this episode of Locked on LSU. So thank you for being here with us. I know in the intro, I'm talking about Clemson's defensive line. And I'm going to get to that here in just a smidge. I don't want to bury the lead, but I want to make sure I go chronologically. I listened to Brian Kelly on Monday, and I did a lot of digging on Clemson's defensive line. I think you're going to be interested in what I found and how it may correlate with the offensive line. It'll make sense in a second. But first, Brian Kelly set the stage, the game we've all been waiting for.
Like I've said to you, we've been working on this since January. After our Baylor win, the bowl game, we went to work on our roster, our process in developing this football team, so that when we get to these moments, right, it's having a team that is confident, that plays the game the right way in a hostile environment. Many would say composure, maturity, and they've got to play with great competitiveness. Each and every play is going to be important for us. So, when you're putting together the DNA of a football team, it's not just about talent acquisition. It's making sure that you have the pieces necessary to compete in those moments, right? When there's a turnover, when there's sudden change, when momentum's not going your way, what's the makeup of your team? And so I like the makeup. But I want to have this conversation with you after the game, that we competed the right way, right? That our composure was amazing. And we played with great confidence. That's the post-game remarks that we want.
Of course, last year's post-game remarks was Brian Kelly pounding his fist into a table, bemoaning the fact that after 3 consecutive openers, we're still talking about the same things that have maligned LSU in these openers when they thought they were in a better position to go do it. But this is a more veteran team. There are new players to this roster, but players with a ton of experience, notably a couple of offensive linemen who we're going to talk about in just a quick second. Now, it's also worth noting, as we talked about, if you were here for Saturday night's show after the practice, the late night practice in Tiger Stadium, we did an episode, and I told you Garrett Nussmeier didn't throw a football. Braylon Moore didn't participate. Dominick McKinley was not present. Carius Kern was riding the exercise bike. There were some notable things. Brian Kelly, though, said his team's healthy.
A couple of bumps and bruises, as most would, but I would think that at this point right now, as I stand in front of you, we expect everybody to be available to us.
Okay, expects everybody to be available. Now, I followed up and asked specifically about Garrett Nussmeier. I want to remind you again, just for those who might have missed it. 2 Fridays ago, Garrett Nussmeier, with media's watching practice at the indoor, Garrett Nussmeier's not throwing, does not throw a pass. We meet with Brian Kelly after that practice. Kelly says Nuss is on a pitch count. We chart all of his reps, and it's just load management. He's fine. Said he was going to practice scrimmage the next day in Tiger Stadium. Again, this is 2 Fridays ago. Lo and behold, Nuss scrimmaged. And the next time the media was out there, he was throwing and fine. But then we go out Saturday and Garrett Nussmeier's not throwing. And it begs the question, is there something going on with Nussmeier? So I asked that question of Brian Kelly, and here was the answer.
When you get into the camp situation, we have I know it's not a great analogy, but we have a pitch count where we want to take our quarterback's load off, and He had all the installation was in, Matt. We were done with installation. So this was just more throwing. We wanted to wait and get into Clemson in game week. And so he'll be out there on Tuesday, practicing full.
You can choose to believe what you want to believe. And I fully understand that coaches have made us, you and me, skeptical when they talk about injuries, because a lot of coaches just will never disclose injuries. Now, in the SEC, there is an injury report with sports betting now being interwoven into college athletics. That's done. Injury reports are done to make sure there isn't nefarious activity or the perception of nefarious activity on the sports betting side. So coaches do have to release an injury report on Thursday. Brian Kelly was ahead of the curve with this. Listen, I covered a coach at LSU in Les Miles, who in 2011, LSU was playing Tennessee in Knoxville. And there were reports or rumors that LSU center that year, PJ Lonergan, had been injured. And Les Miles, every media availability insisted Lonergan's fine, no injury, totally good. Not only did Lonergan not play in that game against Tennessee, he didn't get on the bus to the airport to go to the trip on the plane to Knoxville. He didn't even make the trip. So, yes, if you are skeptical of coaches, you're right to be skeptical. What I will say of Brian Kelly is, in an era when coaches are super secretive of injuries, he's very forthcoming and discloses a lot. He's been very forthright about Nussmeier, and I have no reason not to believe him there, especially given what he said before has been consistent, and we've seen it. Now, I went up to Brian Kelly in the hall after his press conference because he didn't address Carius Kern or Dominick McKinley, and I wanted to know. What he told me is Carius Kern has, wait for it, patellar tendonitis, the same thing that Garrett Nussmeier has, which is basically just knee soreness. It's a fancy way of saying he's got knee soreness. So AB said he's a full go, nothing to it. Just they didn't need to work him out on Saturday, so they didn't. So he just observed. And then Dominick McKinley, who was not at practice on Saturday, was an excused absence for something not foot. Brian Kelly didn't disclose it, but he said it was not injury related, it was not football related, but he had an excused absence from Saturday. So Dominick McKinley is going to be good and ready to go. And you heard Brian Kelly say they expect to have everybody healthy and ready to roll when the Tigers head up to take on the Clemson Tigers this Saturday in the season opener, where they will face what is on paper a very formidable defensive front. But I want to dig a little deeper into that defensive front because, in my opinion, that is the key matchup to watch for Saturday's game there in Clemson, South Carolina. And we're going to dive into that when we come back on Locked on LSU, your team every day. August 26th. It's here. It's officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race. Maybe you love Jaden Daniels or Joey B. Crown your champion in August. The Bengals have now re-signed and extended Trey Hendrickson. You think the Bengals get it done this year? Or you could parlay your division winner dark horses. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because FanDuel Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. We're also brought to you by our friends at Our Lady of the Lake, where trust isn't given, it's earned. And just like LSU athletes earn their success, Our Lady of the Lake health providers earn trust every day. As LSU's championship health partner, Our Lady of the Lake, part of the Franciscan Missionaries of Our Lady Health System, takes care of the Tigers on the field, on campus, and across Louisiana. Whether it's sports medicine, pediatrics, heart care, helping you recover from everyday injuries, they bring championship-level commitment to every patient. You can trust the team that cares for the team you love. Our Lady of the Lake and LSU. Together, we roar. Learn more at ololrmc.com/LSU, ololrmc.com/LSU. All offseason, we have all, me included, highlighted LSU's offensive line as the single biggest question mark, and we are right to do so. You know by now the numbers. LSU lost 4 starters on the offensive line to the NFL draft. Will Campbell and Emory Jones were 3-year starters at tackle. Campbell was the 4th pick of the draft. Miles Frazier, Garrett Dellinger, dudes that played a ton of football at LSU. Frazier was a freshman All-American at FIU before he came to LSU as a 3-year starter at guard. Dellinger moved from Michigan down to LSU, the state of Michigan, signed with LSU out of high school. Played as a little bit as a freshman, became a 3-year starter thereafter. You lost 170 combined games played. Now, you returned DJ Chester, who was your starting center a year ago, but he's moving out of center to guard, where Braylon Moore, the Virginia Tech transfer, is going to replace him. So you're going to have 5 players in new positions when you take the field against Clemson on Saturday night. We've said it a million times. You already know that. And everyone has also talked about the challenge going against that Clemson defensive front. We have talked a lot about Peter Woods and TJ Parker. These are 2 guys who have, by the way, I'm not sitting here trying to disrespect in any way Peter Woods or TJ Parker. These are 2 incredible football players. A year ago, TJ Parker in 14 games had 19 and a half TFLs and 11 sacks. Okay, he wears number 3. You better recognize him. Peter Woods is on the interior. He wears number 11. Last year, he had 8.5 TFLs and 3 sacks to go along with 5 quarterback pressures. By the way, might I add also that with TJ Parker, in addition to the 19.5 TFLs and 11 sacks, he also had 13 quarterback pressures. Yes, you were talking about 2 absolute studs, guys that are going to be that are both very likely first-round draft picks in this coming spring's NFL draft. I am not in any way at all whatsoever trying to minimize the impact that those 2 guys have had, will continue to have in their careers. They have been outstanding players. Now, what is worth noting is sometimes you can have outstanding individual performers that don't contribute to an outstanding unit per se. I'll explain what I mean. As we look a little deeper into those numbers, right? TJ Parker, I mentioned 19 and a half TFLs. Incredible. Well, 5 of those came against Pittsburgh and 4 sacks. So he had 11 sacks on the season, which is incredible. But 5 TFLs and 4 sacks came in that one game against Pittsburgh. In the ACC championship game against SMU, he had another 3.5 TFLs. So in those two games, TJ Parker had 8.5 TFLs. So that means for the rest of the season, he had a combined 11.5 TFLs, which is outstanding. Please don't misunderstand me, but in 12 games, he had 11.5 TFLs. So he's about a TFL per game on average outside of those 2. Now, you can't take those 2 away. Of course, they happen, and it goes to show how he does have the ability to dominate a football game. But by and large, he was kept in check outside of those 2 games. Now, Peter Woods is a 6'3", 310-pound interior player. So it's different when you're talking about Woods because he's not necessarily the guy that's going to stuff the stat sheet per se, as we talked about. He had just 3 sacks a year ago and 8.5 TFLs. But 2.5 of those TFLs came against Georgia. Pretty good. 2 against Virginia. So half of his TFLs came in 2 games, meaning in the other dozen games, he accounted for 4 TFLs. So point is, he can be neutralized in the way he affects the game. Can those guys take over a game? Absolutely. But we also saw many teams neutralize their impact. So it is doable. That's what's worth mentioning here. Now, I mentioned that you could have outstanding players, and those are 2 magnificent football players. I am not minimizing those 2 guys. They're outstanding. But you can have outstanding football players on units. And that's actually what happened at Clemson a year ago. The Clemson Tigers and this defense, which has this incredible reputation, a year ago was 84th in the country in run defense. Clemson allowed, on average, a year ago, 160 rushing yards per game. 160 rushing yards per game. They allowed an average of 4.7 yards per carry last year. So forgive me, but while yes, absolutely, those two players are outstanding. And I think Aaron Terrell, who's a cornerback, who's got the brother of AJ Terrell, who's got a chance to be a first-round draft pick, is a real talent as well. That unit a year ago wasn't great. 84th in the country in rush defense. When they played Georgia threw for 278 and ran for 169. By the way, that was a Georgia team that finished second to last in the SEC in rushing offense, ahead of only LSU. And Georgia ran for nearly 170 yards. Look at the other losses. A home game against Louisville. Louisville in that game in Clemson ran for 210 yards on 27 attempts, an average of 7.8 yards per carry. That's Louisville that ran for 7.8 yards per carry. The other loss that Clemson had was another home game against South Carolina. And in that game, South Carolina ran 42 times for 267 yards, an average of 6.4 yards per carry. Are you seeing a trend? Clemson lost 3 regular season games a year ago. 2 of the opponents ran for over 200 yards. Georgia ran for $170. Look at the loss in the game against Texas in the college football playoff when Clemson season came to an end. In that game, Texas ran 48 times for 292 yards, an average of 6.1 yards per carry. Y'all, there's your answer to the game. If LSU, like the teams that beat Clemson a year ago, with these guys on it, and 2 other guys on the defensive line that are now in the NFL, they ran for over 200 yards against this team. Can you line up and run, which the 4 teams that beat Clemson last year all did with incredible success? By the way, the sack numbers are mighty impressive, which I just went through. Clemson had 35 sacks a year ago. That was 26th in the country. 35 sacks, 26th in the country. LSU last year, 34 sacks, 27th in the country. And nobody's going to look at LSU's defense a year ago, especially without Harold Perkins, and go, man, that was an elite unit. It wasn't. I'm not saying that Clemson is bad. I'm not discrediting Parker and Woods, outstanding football players. What I'm saying is that unit a year ago in their losses could not stop the run. And 2 of those games were home games against Louisville and South Carolina. They lost, and the other 2 were, one was a neutral site game against Georgia. The other was a road game at Texas in the college football playoff. We have talked all season about the need for LSU to line up and be able to run the football and be committed to running the football. If you want to win this game against Clemson, follow the roadmap. You got to be committed to running the football, and you got to be able to run the football like lesser teams than you were able to do a year ago. See if the Tigers can do it on Saturday. If they do, it's because the offensive line, a new look offensive line, got going. We'll talk about them here, and let you hear from Brian Kelly about those guys as we continue Locked on LSU, your team every day. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. More than 150,000 men have already made the switch. So head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use the code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. want to talk about the LSU offensive line, but I also have to remind you we have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. So please go to lockedonpodcasts.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. And thank you sincerely for helping us out. So Brian Kelly, obviously, naturally, was going to be asked about the offensive line and if they've made decisions about the interior. Now, in this answer, it started with him talking about the defensive line, but he also talks about the fact that they are going to continue rotating on the offensive line in this game against Clemson.
I don't know that you always need a static 22. You don't want everybody in a position where you're rotating every single player, but there will be a couple of positions where we'll have some rotation, and I think it will be good for us. I think it makes us better. And so, we look at, different battles, right? We're going to play a number of defensive ends and defensive tackles. It's because we'll be better because of it. I think the same thing would be true on the offensive line. You're going to see more than just 5 guys out there. You'll see, at least 6 or 7, could be as many as 8 offensive linemen playing for us.
So I agree that rotating defensive linemen is a good thing, especially when there's no drop-off. A year ago when you had Jacobian Guillory was by far your best defensive tackle. When he got hurt, it was a massive drop-off to Gio Paez, who had to play out of position. Parashan kicked inside, was out of position. You had a freshman in Ahmad Bro who was asked to do more. You just didn't have depth. When you look at this defensive line where you can go Dom McKinley, Ahmad Bro, Jacobian Guillory, who's back and healthy now, Sadir Mitchell, Bernard Gooden, who you brought in. I mean, you've got 5 or 6 interior defensive linemen, if you want to throw Sean Washington in there as well, where you can rotate, and there's not a great deal of differentiation, so you're constantly keeping fresh bodies in. If you're rotating on the offensive line, it's because you don't have a set 5. A year ago, they weren't rotating on the offensive line. Will Campbell, Emory Jones, Miles Frazier, they were never coming out of the game. Now, Garrett Dellinger got hurt, and Paul Mabenga had to step into that spot. Speaking of, Brian Kelly said you'll see 6, 7, maybe 8. We know Tyree Adams is the left tackle. Weston Davis is going to be the right tackle. Braylon Moore is going to be the center. Josh Thompson is going to be the right guard. The question really is that left guard spot where you've got Paul Mabenga, DJ Chester, and Carius Kern all rotating in. And then also remember Cohen Eccles. So those are the 8 that could play in this game on Saturday. I don't know if we see all 8. Sure hope we don't. I hope the offense gets going, gets churning, and there's no reason to make any change. But if there is reason to make change, it's probably because something isn't going well. But Brian Kelly did talk about Paul Mabenga, DJ Chester, and Cohen Eccles specifically, those 3, and what positives they bring to the offense. And they're all a little different.
Each one brings a little bit different. Paul actually moves very well for us, right? He can handle movements. He's been more consistent from that standpoint. DJ, you love the fact that he played so much football for you last year. He is in a new position if he is at the guard position from the center position, but we like his size, we like his smarts, we like his experience. And then with Cohen, he's physically strong. So if you get into a one-on-one matchup against an elite defensive tackle, he can hold his own physically. And so each one of them brings a little bit to the table, if you will, and that's why most likely you're going to see them all playing.
The hope is sincerely that you send that first unit out, the offense is humming, and there's no reason to make a change. I've said all along that I believe that first unit left to right is going to be Tyree Adams at left tackle, DJ Chester at left guard, Braylon Moore at center, Josh Thompson at right guard, and then Weston Davis at right tackle. Given what we saw on Saturday, where Braylon Moore was not participating, Chester moved to center, Mabenga was playing first team left guard, and we've seen more of Mabenga lately at left guard. It may very well be that Paul Mabenga starts at left guard and Chester is the odd man out, a guy who started 13 games a season ago. It is worth mentioning because Paul Mabenga was, when he went in for Garrett Dellinger, your weak link. His first start was against Alabama. But if you go look at his Pro Football Focus grades, every week after Alabama, throughout the remainder of the regular season, his grades improved. He continued to improve each time out, which is to be expected. So how big of a leap might he be able to make year 1 to year 2 will be fascinating to see. But there's no doubt that Clemson defensive front can be susceptible, can be pushed around. 4 teams did it a year ago in their 4 losses. If you want to go win that game, that unit has got to be able to move bodies the way Georgia, the way Louisville, the way South Carolina, and the way Texas did a year ago. Can this group of LSU offensive linemen put their name on that list? We're going to find out in very short order. But if they do, a big part of it will obviously be having Braylon Moore locked down in the center, a guy who's played at Clemson, a guy who's a 2-year starter at center and solidifies the interior of your offensive line, isn't going to be moved by that environment and knows how to make all the calls. And I don't think, knock on wood, I charted an errant snap all throughout fall camp from Braylon Moore. So the Tigers know the assignment. We'll see if they can answer the bell on Saturday there at Clemson. Okay, thank you so much for making us your first listen. Now, for your second listen, how about you go check out the Portal on podcast or YouTube? Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes of the college football landscape. You can find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hey, if you're listening to us on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. That's the other thing. Hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. Let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day.